Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're setting our sights on, well, a true economic powerhouse you might not immediately think of, Minnesota's manufacturing sector. We're going to pull back the curtain a bit and show you just how vital this industry really is to the state's economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal for this deep dive is really to get you fully informed and, quickly. We've gone through a pretty comprehensive stack of sources, economic data, industry reports, some detailed analyses to pull out the most crucial insights about Minnesota's manufacturing. Things like its current state, key trends, and where it seems to be headed.
Okay, let's unpack that. The sheer economic muscle here, what's the headline? Just how big is this sector? Like GDP, jobs?
Well, the numbers are pretty impressive, actually. Manufacturing accounts for roughly 12% of Minnesota's state GDP. That means it's generating over $57, maybe $58 billion in output annually as of 2023. And it's a huge employer. We're talking about 320,000 to 325,000 Minnesotans working in manufacturing. That's about 11% of the state's total jobs. And just for some context, historically, it's often ranked as the largest private sector contributor to state GDP. I think back in 2016, it even hit like 16%.
Okay, so it's not just big, it's like foundational. And these aren't just any jobs either, are they? I mean, the pay.
Precisely. That's what really stands out, the value these jobs offer. The average annual manufacturing wage in Minnesota, it's around $79,000. Now, that's about 10% above the overall statewide average wage.
10% higher, okay.
Yeah. And just in 2023 alone, these workers collectively earned, a staggering $25.7 billion in wages. So these are really family-supporting careers we're talking about.
And it's not just about the impact inside Minnesota, right? How much of this stuff actually gets sold outside the state, or even outside the country?
Oh, a significant chunk.
Yeah.
Minnesota manufacturers exported over $22.5 billion worth of goods in 2023. Billion.
22.5 billion. Okay. Where does it go?
Our top foreign markets are pretty consistently Canada, Mexico, and China. And the range of products is just incredibly diverse. Everything from sophisticated computer and electronic goods. That category alone brought in about $4.4 billion in 2024 to heavy machinery, transportation equipment, and really critical medical devices.
Right. So it's clear manufacturing is like a bedrock. Driving GDP, creating good jobs, reaching global markets. It really does live up to that phrase state officials use about it powering Minnesota's economy. Okay, now let's dig into the trends a bit. These big numbers, they paint a picture, sure, but what's the story of manufacturing here over the last, say, decade? Has it been growing, shrinking, changing? What do the employment trends tell us?
It's a really fascinating story, one of resilience and definitely transformation. If you look back to 2015, manufacturing employment was sitting around 317,000 jobs. It gradually climbed up to a pre-pandemic peak of, let's say, roughly 324,000, maybe 325,000 jobs by 2018, 2019.
Okay, so some modest growth there.
Yeah, then, of course, came 2020 and COVID-19. That caused a pretty sharp, though brief, dip down to about 309,000 jobs. But the recovery was strong, really strong. By 2022, 2023, employment actually rebounded to around 323,000 to 326,000.
Yes.
Slightly exceeding that 2019 level.
Exceeding the pre-pandemic peak. That's impressive.
It is. And as of 2024, we're seeing about 321,000 to 323,000 manufacturing jobs. So essentially, we're back to, or maybe just a hair above, pre-pandemic strength.
So what's really remarkable here isn't just the raw numbers, maybe, but the story they tell. Manufacturing jobs, despite, all the economic shifts and global chaos, they've effectively held their ground in Minnesota. They've kept that crucial 11% share of total employment. That suggests a sector that's incredibly stable, right? Even if it's not exploding in terms of sheer headcount.
Exactly. And that stability in employment, when you pair it with output, will reveal something really critical: productivity. While employment has been relatively flat, as we said, the nominal manufacturing output, just the dollar amount, grew quite a bit, from about $47 billion in 2015 up to $58.1 billion in 2023.
Okay, but that's nominal. What about inflation?
Right, good question. If we adjust for inflation, look at it in real terms, output in 2023 was actually roughly on par with the mid-2010s. So real output has been relatively flat. But here's the crucial part. Because employment also stayed flat, while real output basically returned to its starting point. Well, labor productivity, that's output per worker, has consistently trended upward.
Ah, okay. So same number of people, roughly, but producing the same amount of real value, maybe even more efficiently. That's a really powerful point about productivity. It sounds like a real transformation in how things are getting made. Is that where the smarter manufacturing idea comes in?
Precisely. It kind of debunks a common misconception. Many assume flat manufacturing employment automatically means jobs are just moving overseas. But here in Minnesota, we're seeing something different. It's not primarily offshoring driving this. It's about smarter manufacturing. These productivity gains we're seeing, they're largely down to automation, efficiency improvements right inside the factories. Companies are producing more or maybe higher value goods with roughly the same number of workers.
That makes sense.
In fact, if you look longer term, say since the late 1980s, Minnesota's real manufacturing output has actually risen about 70%. 70%, while manufacturing employment over that same period has fallen about 28%. So Minnesota is kind of a model for how advanced economies can keep their manufacturing strength, but transform into these high-tech, high-output powerhouses.
That transformation, it really speaks volumes about the sector's resilience, doesn't it? Especially considering everything we face globally. And the fact that manufacturing jobs didn't just recover post-COVID, but actually surpassed their prior peak in 2023, that's huge, especially since it was the first time in several economic cycles that happened. It really suggests the sector entered the mid-2020s with some renewed momentum.
Okay, so we've seen the powerful numbers, the surprising job stability alongside these big productivity gains. But what does this look like on the ground? What are the actual marvels of engineering or even everyday products being made in Minnesota
Yeah.
that add up to these figures? Let's peel back the layers on this diverse manufacturing base.
Right. Minnesota is definitely home to several, let's call them flagship subsectors, each with globally recognized leaders. First, you've absolutely got to talk about medical devices and life sciences.
Medical Alley. Exactly, Medical Alley.
Yeah.
It's a globally recognized hub.
Yeah.
Minnesota ranks, I believe, second nationally in electromedical manufacturing employment. Think of huge companies like Medtronic, a world leader in pacemakers, cardiovascular devices, or 3M, which is actually Minnesota's largest manufacturing employer overall.
Yeah.
They make a ton of health-related products.
Right. 3M's everywhere.
Yeah, and this whole subsector is a massive exporter. Optics, medical, and surgical instruments. That category is consistently Minnesota's #1 manufactured export. So essentially, if you're walking around with, say, a pacemaker, there's a decent chance that a piece of Minnesota engineering is literally keeping you going. It employs tens of thousands, supported by this amazing healthcare ecosystem we have, Mayo Clinic, the U.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also seeing really exciting growth now in biotechnology, biopharmaceutical manufacturing too.
Okay, so med tech is huge. What else?
Yeah. Then there's food processing and agricultural products. This is deeply connected to the state's, rich agricultural output. We're talking household names here. General Mills, Hormel Foods, famous for Spam, of course, their big plants down in Ostalando Lakes. And of course, Cargill, the nation's largest private company, is headquartered right here. This sector employs maybe 50,000 to 60,000 people statewide. It's growing fast too, investing in things like plant-based protein, sustainable ingredients.
Makes sense, given our farms. What's next?
Next up, machinery, equipment, and metal products. This is a really robust sector. Companies like Polaris Inc., headquartered here making snowmobiles, ATVs, the Toro Company making lawnmowers, turf equipment. You find major players like Graco, Donaldson too. This whole category, specially fabricated metals, employs over 44,000 workers. And it's consistently a top export from Minnesota.
Okay, machinery, got it. What about tech?
Right? Computers, electronics, and electrical equipment. Minnesota has a really significant high-tech footprint here. This category is actually the state's single largest export. Remember that $4.4 billion figure for 2024? That's this category. We've got unique niches like hearing aids with Starkey, some high-end audio stuff. And crucially, Bloomington is home to Skywater Technology. They're one of the only U.S.-owned semiconductor foundries.
Oh, the chip maker. That's a big deal now.
Huge deal. They're undergoing a major expansion, partly thanks to that federal CPS Act funding. The goal is to really bolster domestic chip production right here.
Okay, one more major one.
Finally, let's mention wood, paper, and forest products. It has a long tradition here, obviously leveraging Minnesota's big timber resources. You have Anderson Corporation and Marvin Sword. They're among the nation's largest window and door manufacturers based up north and in Bayport, plus several significant paper mills. And there's even new investment happening in advanced areas, like engineered wood and bio-based materials.
And beyond those big five, you mentioned others too, right? Like chemicals, plastics, printing, and Cirrus Aircraft up in Duluth building those cool little composite planes.
That's right. It just highlights Minnesota's incredible manufacturing diversity. And really, it's this diversity that provides immense stability for the state's economy. Something like 40% of Minnesota's Fortune 500 companies are actually in manufacturing. Think 3M, General Mills, Polaris, Hormel, Land O'Lakes. And while a lot of HQs are in the Twin Cities, their production plants, their suppliers, are spread across the state. Over 8,600 manufacturing companies statewide. This variety helps Minnesota weather downturns if, one particular sector has a bad year.
Okay, so if we talk about where things are made, how does geography shape this landscape? You mentioned the distribution. We see pretty distinct roles for the Twin Cities metro versus greater Minnesota, right?
That's a really key distinction, yeah. In the Twin Cities metro area, manufacturing tends to focus more on the high-value, technology-driven sectors
Mm-hmm.
and corporate headquarters. This is where most of the major medtech firms, electronics companies, and the big HQs like 3M are located. A lot of the R&D and design work is concentrated here, with some local production too. Now, manufacturing actually makes up a smaller share of metro employment, maybe around 8%, just because the services sector is so huge here.
Right.
But a significant challenge in the metro is that aging manufacturing workforce we touched on earlier. The share of workers aged 55 and older, it shot up from 12% back in 2000 to 27% by 2023.
Wow, over a quarter.
Yeah, that's a big wave of impending retirements that the industry really needs to prepare for.
Okay, but then you shift focus outstate to greater Minnesota, and manufacturing often plays a totally different role. It's central, isn't it? Like the lifeblood of many communities.
Absolutely, it really is. In places like central Minnesota, southeast Minnesota, manufacturing provides over 15% of all jobs. 15%. Even northwest and southwest Minnesota have high shares, like 13 to 15%. And you see these compelling examples of towns literally built around a factory or a plant. Austin with Hormel, Warroad with Marvin Windows, Thief River Falls with Arctic Cat. These companies provide stable, good-paying jobs in communities that might not have many other large employers. It's critical.
And this has led to some really interesting regional specialties developing over time, hasn't it?
Indeed, it has. If you look at southeast Minnesota, around Rochester, in that area, it's a mix of medical manufacturing, industrial machinery, food processing. Head up to the northwest, strong in recreational vehicles, think Polaris, Windows like Marvin, and lots of agriculture-related manufacturing. Central Minnesota is often called a manufacturing powerhouse. Just a broad mix, metal fabrication, building materials, equipment manufacturing. Even the Northeast, the Arrowhead region, which struggled for decades, is seeing manufacturing job growth again, partly thanks to newer manufacturers like Sears Aircraft.
That's great to hear about the Northeast.
Yeah, and what's really exciting, maybe the key takeaway here, is that state economists forecast manufacturing job growth in all regions of Minnesota over the next decade.
All regions, okay. And there's that notable trend, too, of advanced manufacturing spreading out geographically. You mentioned an example earlier.
Right, the BioForge biomanufacturing facility planned down in Marshall, that's in southwest Minnesota. This is a massive project for a company called Sologen. Got a huge $213.6 million federal loan plus state support. They're going to ferment corn sugar into greener industrial chemicals. It's bringing high-skill biotech jobs right into a regional center. It really shows how interconnected the state is becoming in these advanced sectors.
Right.
That's a perfect example of it. Twin Cities manufacturers, they often rely on suppliers outstate, and rural manufacturers benefit from the R&D, the logistics based in the metro. It creates this really interdependent economic network. The success of one region often supports another.
Okay, let's pivot now to the human side of manufacturing, and probably one of the most pressing issues for the sector, the workforce. You mentioned that aging workforce statistic, especially in the cities. What are the full implications of that?
Well, it's a huge challenge, no question. That proportion of workers over 55 hitting 27% in the Twin Cities. It just foreshadows this massive wave of retirements. And that severely exacerbates the skill shortages that were already there. Minnesota has had consistently low unemployment, right? Recently around 3-4%. Job vacancies in manufacturing hit record highs a few years back, over 11,000 in 2017. And they've stayed really high post-pandemic.
11,000 openings.
Yeah. And the state's Department of Employment and Economic Development, DEED, they project over 93,000 manufacturing job openings between now and 2032.
93,000, wow.
It's a staggering number. It really highlights the urgent need to attract and train basically an entire new generation of workers for this sector.
So facing that kind of demand, how are manufacturers responding? What are they actually doing on the ground to try and fill these roles?
Well, it's definitely top of mind for them. Something like 77% of firms expected this tight labor market to continue into 2025. So companies are boosting wages and benefits, that's for sure. About 70% planned wage increases of at least 3% recently just to attract and keep folks. But beyond just pay, they're seriously ramping up recruitment efforts. using things like Manufacturing Month in October, hosting career fairs, plant tours, doing more outreach into schools. And crucially, they're also making a bigger effort to target underrepresented groups, setting up programs to bring more women, minorities, immigrants into manufacturing roles.
And what about the skills themselves? As factories get more automated, more high-tech, what are the new demands on workers? And how is Minnesota helping people get those skills?
That's a really critical question because, yeah, there's this growing demand for skills in things like CNC machining, robotics programming, advanced maintenance technology, quality control. Minnesota has responded by really bolstering workforce training initiatives, things like a Drive for Five program, which focuses on high-demand jobs. There are Minnesota Job Skills partnership grants that help companies partner directly with colleges for customized training. We even have a specific automation training incentive program.
So targeted programs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But one significant challenge remains: knowledge transfer. As those veteran workers retire, companies are really worried about losing their irreplaceable expertise. So you're seeing more focus on mentoring programs, maybe phased retirement options, trying to bridge that gap.
And this tight labor market, it's also given a lot more leverage to organized labor, hasn't it? We saw several manufacturing companies face strikes or some pretty tough negotiations in 2023, 2024. Workers using these shortage conditions to push for better pay and conditions.
That's absolutely right. It's a very dynamic environment right now. But the upside is clear. Manufacturing still offers really solid careers with above-average wages. We mentioned that nearly $800 higher than the all-industry average in places like southeast Minnesota. So the technical colleges, the apprenticeship programs, they are just crucial for addressing this skills gap. It's a critical piece for the state's future manufacturing growth and stability.
Okay, so with these challenges, particularly that workforce crunch, how are Minnesota manufacturers adapting, planning for the future? What are their sort of cutting-edge strategies to not just survive, but really thrive in this environment?
Well, a standout strategy you see across the board is heavy strategic investment in automation and advanced manufacturing technologies. We're seeing a pretty steady increase in robotics, computer-aided systems, Internet of Things devices right on the factory floors. Automation is just key to maintaining productivity when you have a limited workforce. And it also takes over tasks that are repetitive or maybe dangerous. Think robotic welders, autonomous guided vehicles moving materials, or even CNC machines running complex jobs overnight in a lights-out production scenario.
Right. And the state's helping with this.
Yes, the state government is actively supporting this shift. DEED, for example, launched an automation loan participation program. They provide grants to help train workers on these new systems.
But this must raise some complex questions, right? If automation means fewer workers are needed for certain tasks, how does that fit with the need to fill, 93,000 job openings?
That is a very nuanced point, absolutely. Automation definitely requires significant capital investment and a lot of adaptation from companies and workers. And while it boosts efficiency, it does displace some lower-skilled jobs. That partly explains why manufacturing employment has seen that long-term decline even while output surged. However, the future isn't really about wholesale replacement of workers. The emphasis now is increasingly on augmenting workers with technology.
Augmenting? How so?
Think cobots, collaborative robots working safely alongside humans, or using augmented reality tools to guide complex assembly or maintenance tasks. Education systems are actively updating their curricula to include these advanced skills, making sure our workforce can work with this new technology, not just be replaced by it.
Okay, that makes sense. And besides automation, after all the recent global disruptions, there's been a critical focus on supply chain resilience. What does that look like in practice here?
It's been a complete reevaluation for many companies. Disruptions like the pandemic, trade conflicts, the semiconductor shortages, they hit Minnesota manufacturers hard. You had medical device firms, for example, scrambling because of chip shortages that literally threatened their ability to produce life-saving pacemakers.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
So this has prompted companies to take really decisive steps. Things like diversifying their supplier bases, deliberately seeping out more domestic sources, increasing inventory of critical inputs, kind of move away from pure just-in-time towards more just-in-case thinking, improving logistics flexibility. Some are even actively reshoring certain production steps or localizing them more.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about Skywater Technologies' expansion. Again, part of that is explicitly about ensuring domestic chip supply chain security. Or that new Salugan Bioforge plant down in Marshall that enhances resilience by producing key bio-based chemicals domestically using Minnesota corn instead of relying on imports.
That sounds like a really complex balancing act, though, between globalization, which offers efficiencies, and localization for resilience. Isn't there a risk here? I mean, While diversifying supply chains sounds great for security, doesn't it also add cost? Could it potentially slow down innovation compared to a super optimized global system? How are manufacturers handling those trade-offs?
It is a very delicate balance, and you've absolutely hit on a crucial point there. Manufacturers are indeed accepting some increased costs in certain areas, trading that for greater security and predictability. Now, Minnesota companies still rely heavily on international trade, remember, over $26 billion in goods exports in 2024. So globalization isn't going away, but they're learning to be incredibly nimble, shifting export strategies when needed, seeking tariff exemptions, building stronger regional partnerships, maybe within the upper Midwest. What's clear is that these resilient strategies, they're not temporary fixes. They are now a permanent part of manufacturing planning. So manufacturers are emerging leaner, certainly more automated, and profoundly more cognizant of supply chain risks than they were 5 years ago.
Okay, this leads us perfectly into the really exciting part. Minnesota's future-facing investments. With all these adaptations, lessons learned, what are the next big frontiers for manufacturing in the state? Where's the growth going to come from?
Well, Minnesota is really positioning itself strategically for significant growth in several key advanced manufacturing arenas. First, as we touched on, biomanufacturing and bioindustrial processing. That Solugen Bioforge plant in Marshall, set to open in 2025, it's a real game changer. Fermenting corn sugar into greener industrial chemicals. It got the largest federal investment in U.S. biomanufacturing since a 2022 executive order. That means high-skilled biotech jobs moving right into a regional center.
That's huge for Marshall.
It is. Also, there's BioMADI, that's a Department of Defense-supported institute based at the University of Minnesota. They're planning an innovation and production facility out in Maple Grove. It'll be like a test bed for new bioproducts and also for training workers in this emerging field. And all this builds on our already strong ethanol and biofuels industry, which is now exploring things like sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel.
Okay, bio is big. What else?
Then you have clean tech and renewable energy manufacturing. This is another major focus. Back in October 2023, Minnesota was part of a Midwest coalition that got awarded nearly $1 billion for a regional hydrogen hub. That positions us firmly in the emerging hydrogen economy, creating potential manufacturing opportunities for things like electrolyzers, fuel cells. We're also seeing growth potential in local solar and wind component manufacturing, plus innovation in energy storage EV components.
Hydrogen, renewables. Got it. Chips.
Right, the semiconductor and electronics supply chain. We keep coming back to Skywater Technology in Bloomington. They're benefiting from one of the very first National CHIPS Act awards for their expansion. The aim is really to make Minnesota an important hub for domestic chip manufacturing, especially given Skywater's unique role as a U.S.-owned foundry that supports critical defense and medical device industries.
Makes sense. Any other areas?
And finally, I'd highlight advanced materials and additive manufacturing. You have companies like Proto Labs out in Maple Plain. They're leaders in quick-turn prototyping using 3D printing and CNC machining. They're investing heavily in things like metal additive manufacturing. This builds on Minnesota's really rich legacy in materials science. Think back to all the inventions from 3M over the decades. And the University of Minnesota is actively researching things like nanomaterials, composites, smart materials.
Okay, so it sounds like Minnesota is really leveraging its existing strengths, agriculture, materials, med tech, but also aggressively pushing into these new high-tech areas.
That's exactly the overarching strategy. These new developments, they're designed to complement our established industries, not replace them. They augment them with new high-tech layers. The goal isn't to stop being great at food processing or medical devices. It's to build upon those strengths, aiming for sustainable economic growth, greater resilience, more diversification, all by creating these highly skilled, innovative jobs for the future.
Okay, so bringing it all together then, Minnesota's manufacturing sector in 2025 really seems like a dynamic picture. Resilience, transition. It remains, without question, a bedrock of the economy, though.
Absolutely. It's still roughly 1/8 of the state GDP, employs over 320,000 people across this incredibly broad array of industries, from, high-tech medical devices to essential wood products.
Yeah.
The past decade threw immense challenges at it: a global pandemic, workforce shortages, major supply chain hiccups. But Minnesota manufacturers, they adapted. Through technology adoption, through more agile strategies, and what's more, it continues to be the absolute lifeblood of so many communities, particularly outside the Twin Cities metro. providing stable GMs, supporting this whole network of suppliers.
And the sector is clearly looking forward, isn't it? Leaning into these incredible opportunities in advanced manufacturing, whether that's building those bio-based chemical plants, making the chips and components for tomorrow's electronics, or producing the equipment for a clean energy future. Minnesota seems to be aiming high.
And that forward momentum is really supported by active collaboration between the public sector, the private sector, focusing on training workers, investing in automation, attracting these cutting-edge projects. It's all about ensuring that manufacturing, which has been the state's historic economic engine, remains competitive, remains vibrant for decades to come.
So as you, our listeners, reflect on this deep dive, maybe consider this. Minnesota's manufacturing sector today, in 2025, it's deeply rooted in a really proud history, yes. But it's also remarkably focused on innovating for the future, still striving to build things by hand for the world to enjoy, as that state motto for manufacturers suggests. It's really a story of constant evolution, creating the future right here in Minnesota.